This is a first for us, so I'm very excited. And this was Alejandro's idea, which he threw at me. I don't even remember 6 months ago, maybe. And I was like, yeah, we'll get it scheduled. And finally this year, I'm like, all right, all those ones that I was like, we'll get them scheduled, we're doing. So this is really exciting. We have a panel consisting of four men who are going to talk about what it's like being vulnerable and just their whole journey, their spiritual journey. And Melanie and I don't have to do a lot of talking, so we're excited about that because we're all talked out, if you can believe it, right? Oh, thank you, Michelle. Six of her favorite teachers here. I like that. Thank you very much. And yeah, feel free to drop any questions in the chat. We're going to get started by letting everyone introduce themselves. And I want to point out that this is Jake's second time here. When we had him on Ask Your Guides for the very first time, I was just looking at the order on screen and was like, oh, Jake, so you can introduce yourself. And he had no idea what was going on. So we're not going to start with you, Jake. We're going to start with Weston this time.
All right, thank you, Violet. Good evening, everybody. My name is Weston McWhorter. I am a holistic health and well-being coach based in the Washington, D.C. area. I've been a teacher on Insight Timer for not quite a year now. I do a Monday morning meditation and breathwork session to kind of like kick the week off. And I've had the distinct honor of being a part of a couple of these panels now. So it's really excited to be here tonight. And yeah, my intention is to just be present and grounded and be here with an open heart. So thank you.
Thank you. Alejandro, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Hello. Hi, I'm Alejandro. I am a regular here at this point. Third co-host. Just kidding.
No, you are.
Health and wellness coach, mindfulness and meditation teacher, mental health advocate. Um, yeah, I've done it. Cool. Super stoked to be here. I've been on IT as a teacher a little bit over 3 years with a break in between. So I think almost a year and a half now, steady, truly with a heart for vulnerability, which is a word I'm sure we'll say a lot today, a heart for authenticity, a heart for healing, and a heart to really create safe spaces for people to be just as we are, whatever that looks like, whatever that sounds like. For men to be in a safe space to truly be the embodiment of the reality of who they've always been. And so I am super excited to be here. I am honored to be with these teachers, and I am stoked. I am a little bit of a fanboy right now because, like I was telling them before we went live, I've been stalking them for a while. I'm super honored. I'm excited. So I'm gonna stop talking now because I'll talk more later, I'm sure. So
I love that. I love it. All right, Jake, we'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Violet. I appreciate you letting me go third. Yeah, thank you for hosting this. First off, both of you guys, I know it's been full weeks, full days, and so creating the time and space for us to come on and have these conversations feels really important. And I feel that same level of giddiness that Alejandro is personifying. It feels like it's stoking the fire within me that is excited for this as well. I've been on Insight Timer for about two and a half years, and I went through a season where I was super consistent and I was doing twice a days, and it's been a little bit more sporadic since with all the moving. So men's coach, men's work coach and facilitator. I love working with men on all things physical, mental, emotional, and that's kind of been evolving over the last 6 months to a year as we build these different men's communities in and around my sphere. So that's a big part of the work I love to do. And Yeah, I'm gonna just leave it at that because there's gonna be. I feel like we're gonna get to the end of this and feel like we need more time to chat. So stoked to be
That's
here.
fine. We could always do part two. Don't worry. All right, John, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Steen. I'm in San Francisco, California. I'm a certified energy healing practitioner, and I've been an IT teacher for 14 months now. And most of the work that I do is all about helping people find the energy blocks in their system, a lot of trauma work, because that's what it has done for me. I've been trying to heal myself my entire adult life, and I could never get to where I wanted to or needed to until I found energy healing just a few years ago here on Insight Timer and started studying that modality with the teachers that I found here. And now I have been able to really heal myself and heal my trauma and my inner child trauma. And so now my goal is to give back to this community and help others to find where their energy blocks are and taking a step to help the world with that as well. And I'm excited to be here as well too. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we are just going to get started. Melanie is going to put some questions out there, and you're going to have a great conversation. And I'm just going to sit here and relax.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you guys for coming. I think it's so needed. And if you're listening, please drop any questions that you have, thoughts in the chat. And one of the first things that came in was a question about vulnerability. And it is, when did you start your vulnerability journey? Or is it something you've always embraced? You don't need me yourselves. You guys can just jump in. It can be very conversational.
Not all at the same time, guys. Not all at the same time. Come on.
I'll start. Honestly, I grew up with an alcoholic mom. And if anyone knows anything about living with an alcoholic parent, it can be very, very hard and challenging. I spent my whole life going to individual therapy, group therapy, Al-Anon, and I could never get anywhere to where I wanted to go. And part of that was not being vulnerable. I was holding all my pain and my trauma inside my body. And I never felt safe to be vulnerable because when you're holding trauma, especially childhood trauma, vulnerability can be a very, very scary and unsafe thing. And I found that throughout my adult life, all my relationships that I've had were unsafe. Even through this part of my healing journey, even my friendships were actually not completely safe for me. So it's only been since energy healing that I have stepped into my vulnerability, and it's because of this community allows that space for you to be vulnerable. And honestly, one of the big things that really helped me before I designed my 2 courses in the fall of this year was taking Alejandro's beautiful, amazing 3-day course on vulnerability. That did something for me that propelled me into my vulnerability and really just helped me step into it more. And I've said this a few times in my lives, especially if you are someone who fears vulnerability or fears being just putting yourself out there in the chat, because we see that as teachers, right? I myself don't use the chat a lot. Um, if you had that trauma, I would highly recommend taking Alejandro's 3-day course, and then going into my 2 courses on the mother wound and father wound. I think those, well, I've said this a few times in my lives, I think that would help you with your trauma, and I think they're would pair each other nicely to really help you get to some of the wounds and some of those energy blocks you may be carrying.
Go ahead, Weston. I saw you.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. I didn't want to like flip a coin, man. So this is a really great question. When I first came into men's work back in 2019, my first men's group was really, I would say, probably like anti-vulnerability from like the top down. It was kind of I won't say it was in its mission statement, but it was very much like kind of like primal masculine forward and not a whole lot of room for like feelings and emotions and things like that. And I noticed that, what was really missing for me was feeling comfortable to be able to express like some of the fear and pain and sadness and anger that was going on inside of me at that time in my life. And remembering how good it feels to allow for like the full range of human emotional expression, which in a lot of ways, like, I mean, especially again, like in the men's work world, vulnerability, that word gets tossed around a whole lot. And in a lot of ways, to a lot of guys, it can almost be like a little bit of a blocker to actually getting involved in opening up, So for myself, I've been a little bit on a mission of trying to, redefine what vulnerability means and how I think about it and how I talk about it, so that it feels accessible and available to a broader spectrum of human experiences. And it's been helpful for me to go back and connect with like, baby Weston, or like really like young Weston, the guy who was like so sweet and so curious and so loving and so like open. And to remember that those qualities they never left me. They might have just gotten kind of like conditioned out or experienced out over the course of my lifetime. And so yeah, I would think it's not something I've always embraced, but it has been a really beautiful experience of remembering, especially over the last few years, what it means to just like stand in a place of emotional truth and no fear of being able to access that part. So yeah, with that, I'm kind of laying it there.
I'll go. For me, it's been the remembrance of what that feels like. I know, for those of you who have been in my lives with my mom, I've had my mom here before, and I was blessed enough to grow up in a household where I was free to express whatever needed to be expressed, and I was guided to express things in healthy ways and taught, if you're angry, you don't have to, throw things around, and if you're sad, you can cry. But as I grew up being a teenager with a lot of unhealed trauma and a lot of hidden trauma, I just hardened and I became what I thought a man should do and be. So I started doing sports, and it was hockey because it was physical, and I left theater aside and I left the arts aside because that was too too not masculine enough. And then as someone who grew up in a religious environment, in a Christian environment, having same-sex attraction at that point was also really weird. It was like, what is going on? So it was the suppression of all emotions except for anger. So my late teens and my early adulthood were all about anger, and this is me. And it has been, for me, it has been remembering when I lost everything, when I got to the end of myself, where everything I had built as a 22-year-old, very successful life with the condo, with the house, with the 2 cars, with the career, when my foundation gave up and everything fell apart, I had no choice but to revisit young Alex, to revisit young Alejandro, to revisit um, that child that felt safe enough to be himself and to then learn how to create. So it's, for me, vulnerability has been a journey, has been something that was very common as a kid, as a child. And I grew up in a pretty healthy environment when it came to expression. Um, even in a religious, even at church, I had beautiful people who nurtured all of who I was. And then, growing up, seeing what society and my friends, who they were and how I needed to act, then things kind of like I hardened. And then I had no choice. I was in group therapy with older men. I was the youngest. I was 23. And they were already um up there. I'm not gonna say any ages because I don't want to say that I'm the youngest one here, but I am, I think. Much love, just learning from the wise. But it was beautiful to be embraced with all my questions and all my doubts about myself by men who didn't really care about anything but me, men who were in the same journey as me in healing, and men who said who you are as a man is valid with all those questions, with your likes, with your dislikes, with your with your experiences, with the trauma that makes you man enough, not because you're a man or not because of your body parts, but because you are enough just as you are. So yeah, it's been, for me, vulnerability has been a journey, something that I love and I embrace now, not because it has been forced or learned, just because it's the return to the reality of who we all are, and it's embracing that divinity and that identity. So yeah.
Man, this has been such a treat just getting to listen to all your guys's stories and perspectives on this. And I resonate actually a lot with Alejandro, and um, this being in that vulnerability has been a journey, but it's also, I grew up in what felt like a quite a safe household. That child that was very freely expressed came with me probably through up into junior high school. And similarly, I just noticed that playing football, rough sport, manly man sport, guys being guys, it wasn't as conducive an environment for the deep kind of questions. I think that's where my vulnerability probably lied, was just in my curiosity. It was always just a deep questioner. I wanted to know how you were actually doing. Don't tell me good, tell me what's actually going on, because I can see that it's not like, I don't want the surface answer, but that was pretty common. So when I started my vulnerability journey, probably would have been, I would have thought that I was being super vulnerable with myself and with the world, until I went through a breakup and realized just how much I wasn't sharing. When I was 21, I ended up, 23 years old. I had a relationship end that was a 6-year relationship. And at the time, I was already starting to coach, and I had already been doing personal development work for like 5 years at the time. And then I had this breakup, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I have not been sharing anything with anyone. There's so much buried shame. There's so much buried insecurity. There's so much that I haven't looked at. And me asking deep questions was what I had perceived was being vulnerable at the time. And it was as vulnerable as what I knew vulnerability was. And then I cracked another layer, And I was like, holy smokes, now I'm having to be vulnerable with myself, because now, Wes, I love how you were touching on even just the word vulnerability. I'm sure some of the guys tuning into this are going, like, it already has a little bit of a, it still holds a little bit of a, I don't know what it is. It's just like, it's whether it's a feminine thing, whether it's an uncomfortable thing, whether it's like, I don't know if that's what I want to do. It's edgy, it's uncomfortable. So I almost prefer at this point, just if I have to speak on vulnerability, I prefer almost just to put in the place of honesty, because that radical honesty is for myself what feels most vulnerable when I'm with me and when I'm with the people I'm around. And a big part of my journey with it has, so it's not something that I've always had, but it is something I've learned to come to re-embrace. And it goes through seasons where I notice myself hiding from myself and I gotta get vulnerable again. And so yeah, that's been my journey with it. Another part of it that I'll add is just, and maybe this feeds into another conversation topic, but when to be vulnerable, because I've had it where I've been vulnerable and it's been dropped. It hasn't been the right time or place for it. And I'm sure this is where, you take off the armor and someone stabs you and it's like, well, shit, this is why we're armored, because we don't want to get hurt. So that's what makes vulnerability, that's what can make vulnerability scary, so to speak. And so knowing when, I'm just curious, perhaps if that's something, I don't know what questions have come through, but if you guys have had experiences that have taught you when and where to be vulnerable.
I love the concept radical honesty, because I for a while, so most of my men's work is with men who are incarcerated or have been incarcerated. So how do we embrace vulnerability in such a hostile environment? It's a beautiful, it's a beautiful journey. I love it. It's so dope. It's so awesome. And the question of when, it's such an interesting question, because in discussion, usually the duality of, so when am I vulnerable if I am authentic, right? So it's vulnerability from the standpoint, from the way I've experienced it for myself. There's authenticity and there's vulnerability. Vulnerability, we're talking about the expression of the fullness of who I am, the showing up as, hey, this is me, right? All of me. There's definitely a time and a space to do that. I can't go into a prison and say, hey guys, this is all of me right off the bat. That might eventually happen as we build trust and as we build connection and as we build community. But I think it's important to be rooted in authenticity, showing up in that full honesty. Understanding also one of my biggest in my journey, one of my biggest hurdles in the vulnerability journey has been oversharing. In the past, I wanted to connect so badly, which was a beautiful thing. There was this hunger to connect that I would say, hey, this is me and all my trauma and all my story. And people were like, what the okay, cool, thanks. And there was this hope to connect, but also this is my experience, this is Alejandro. For me, the need for what was also an underlying need for acceptance. I had not fully accepted myself yet. So I wanted this connection because I wanted the acceptance. So when to be vulnerable, how do you learn that? For me, it has been trial and error. It has been learning to read the room, learning, especially as a coach. I started as a mental health coach when I was 19, 20. Completely all about other people and asking those questions, Jake, completely super relatable, asking those deep questions, but then realizing at 22 that I had never asked those questions to myself because it was easier to avoid those questions to myself. So for me, it has been trial and error. It has been reading the room, but always showing up authentically. And as a coach, as someone who creates these spaces, truly risking what others might think of me. When someone in prison, it's chooses to be vulnerable enough and share their story, and I start feeling things bubbling up and allowing those tears to flow in a very hostile environment. And one of the things that I've learned is that vulnerability begets vulnerability. When I am vulnerable as a coach, as a teacher, as a healer, I invite others into this. But it's really, for me, I didn't go to any program, any school that taught me this is the right time to be vulnerable. This is the right time to put on, the shield or whatever. Trial and error, and a lot of, especially in my younger years, a lot of going home and feeling completely naked, and feeling like, ugh, like this is dirty. For me, especially with my past trauma of abuse, it's like, ugh. So learning to have these fluid boundaries and be very playful in the process. I know it also sounds very serious and it sounds very heavy, but I've also learned to be very playful with, and it's okay if I mess up, if I fuck up, oh, okay, my bad. And it's co-creating spaces with people. So yeah.
I'm just going to jump in because that's really tying into what Joaquin asked earlier, who said, how do you open up when this double standard exists? Some want us to be open, but many may criticize our masculinity once we do. How do you know who is a safe space?
Yes, wow.
That's a hard question in a way. I notice when I'm in groups of people and if the topic will get a little serious, I will say little things to feel someone out. And because you can feel the energy if when you're with other people, where they're coming from, and whether or not it feels safe to share who I am. And a lot of times it actually doesn't feel safe. And because I'm exactly like Alejandro was saying, I would overshare um, um, parts of my trauma just to get that attention and get that love from people. Um, because it was that external approval. I was seeking it because I didn't have it inside. So when you don't have that inside, you're going to constantly seek that and never feel completely safe when you're in those spaces where you may really want to be vulnerable instead of oversharing. Because when you overshare, that's just another whole energy of its own, and you can see people backing up or repel. It's a it's a it's a very challenging balance um, to maneuver, in my experience.
I think something that came up for me too is just, and this has been a hard lesson for me to learn. And I think it also ties into that point of oversharing, is that, like, we're not going to be for everybody, right? Like, as much as I would like to think that everybody in the world is going to like who I am, and if I show up in my authenticity, that's going to be welcome and accepted across the board. And I just know that that's not true. And yet, I trust that, when I come from a place of integrity and alignment and authenticity, and just allowing, like, almost separating myself from my ego and what my ego wants to try to say, and to really just try and be quiet and listen to like what spirit wants to bring through. Then I don't worry so much about that, and I think that particularly around, and we're going to keep talking about vulnerability, which I really am on the search for like a better way to like a different way to use that word, because I do feel like, again, especially like in men's work, that it can be a barrier to entry. And it gets talked about so much. But I love to talk about openness and receptivity. Those two qualities, I think, embody what it means to have like the divine feminine activated inside of a male body, to just be open to receive. And I've found, Alejandro, just sort of like reflect back to that experience of being able to like feel the emotions of people around you and what they're experiencing, and allowing that to come through you. And that happens so many times to me in community circles, where somebody will be sharing something that's going on with them, and it just like rips at me, and I'm like, why am I crying? This is clearly not my experience. And even my partner's asked this before. She's like, what's going on with you? And I think it's just the ability to like, I don't even know if it's an ability, but just like allowing myself to really connect with another's experience creates trust, creates connection, and maybe opens the door a little bit for that other person to maybe drop a little bit deeper into their experience, and maybe unlock another layer of themselves. And so, yeah.
This is from Michelle, which some of you guys had already answered about how you got to where you are and what was the tipping point. And she also followed up with, is there anything women can do to encourage vulnerability, but not shame for not being vulnerable?
As as a man raised by a single woman, man, it's such a Michelle, good question. Michelle, good question. I should have thought about it when I saw it. I'm just rambling and talking. Great, because I got nervous. One of the things that I've learned culturally, as a Hispanic man, I am a brown Hispanic man. Culturally, in my culture, and I say this not out of judgment, I say this out of exploration, and I say this out of my own experience. Women are usually have bought into the idea that masculinity looks a certain way. And they have been so, as a society, we've all been so conditioned to see masculinity as the provider, as the strong one, as the backbone. And yes, all of those things are true, but it's also this emotional, stoic presentation of what a man should look like that sometimes when you go into connection with other women, not only romantic, but also in friendships, and there is this invitation to be just as we are, there's this like, wait, but that's supposed to be me, not you. And I've experienced that in my own personal relationships, like, okay, why are you so like attentive to details? Or why are you asking if I'm okay? So it's how can women help us be as we are, whatever that looks like? I think is understanding, and this is something that my mom and I have talked about. You'll hear me talk a lot about my mom. Maybe I'm a mama's boy. It's okay. And she's been here before, and y'all love her. So, one of the things that I've learned from my mom is my mom has allowed me to be just as I am, and allowed me and other men, my friends who call her mom also, to truly be without the judgment of this is not what they should be doing. My mom, one time, I was already 19, maybe 20, and my friends and I they had come over to watch TV, and we would blow up this air mattress in the living room and just lay on the floor and watch TV. Nothing weird. And the fact that I am having to justify that it was not weird just shows where we're at. And that's where I'm at still. I have to justify that it was not sexual, it was not weird, because I'm bisexual and they're straight. We fell asleep and we ended up, there's a picture somewhere. We ended up like sort of cuddling, not cuddling, but like, oh my God, okay, movements, thank you. But like just laying next to each other. And my mom now tells the story in a way that in a different time in her life, she would have been like, hey guys, like, come on, like, let's move a little bit. Let's just allowing us to be. Because again, allow men to be, allow us to watch the movie and cry without having to record us because it's so weird. Without having to say a comment like, oh my God, you're crying? Because those things are bring us back to, oh shit, like, oh, I shouldn't cry. But also for us as men, who are you surrounding yourself around? Are they supportive of your own journey? And that's to what John said earlier on our friendships and whatnot. So I'm rambling because I really didn't think about the question, and then I got really nervous because I don't want to make it seem like women are against me. No, because I love women. If there's a feminist in the group, it's probably me. Women, but truly allowing us to hold space for us, and holding space sometimes just look like that, like just holding the space. It doesn't, there doesn't have to be an action behind it. There doesn't have to be words. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be anything, but just allow us to be. Allow us to watch the movie with the dog and to cry, because dogs is truly our best friend, although I have cats. Allow us to watch The Notebook and truly be in the notebook. Allow us to watch beaches and truly understand the friendship. Allow us to watch radio and cry at the brotherhood that we all crave. So hold space for us.
I'll just tag on to that real quick and say that I understand that this is kind of like, there's like cultural nuances that are present in this question, that I can kind of only speak from my own perspective. But I think what I really wanted to share is that the world could use with more encouragement around nonviolent communication and how to like talk to each other and how to support each other, right? So rather than like, I mean, sometimes just saying like, wow, I really appreciate you sharing that with me, without any other thing that goes along with it, and vice versa, men to women, men, it doesn't really matter. Like we could all do a better job of just like, to Alejandro's point, just creating that space where we can all show up, we can all feel safe, and then acknowledging the effort that it takes just to communicate as a human being openly and honestly. I think could be helpful too. So.
Yeah, adding on one other layer here too, because this is such a powerful question, and it's also so nuanced, in my mind goes to playing out how many different scenarios and how many different situations and dynamics could be present. And the question, just coming back to it, what can women do to support a man's vulnerability without creating shame? And one of the first things that showed up for me was Connor Beaton does a lot in this space as well, but something I really appreciate that he says is like when we bring our emotions to a woman, it shouldn't be for them to fix it. There needs to be the understanding that if I'm coming to you with a vulnerable share, that you can also trust me that I can take care of it and I can handle it. And I'm not looking for you to fix it. I'm not looking for you to change anything with it. I just need you to be present to my experience because it's going to build intimacy when you can see that I can cry, that I'm connected to my heart, that I'm actually upset that, you know, I lost my mom, and I'm not just stone cold about the whole thing, but rather you see that I have this emotional experience. And to Alejandro's point, normalizing emotions, not filming when we're crying or not mocking when we're upset or whatever it is. I think sharing, and maybe this is communicated by the man as well, but also could be it, like Wes said, communicates both ways. Hey, I'm not needing you to fix this. I'm bringing this with you to share that I've got something on my heart. And I know for myself, and for a lot of men included, that sometimes the intensity of our vulnerability is what stops us from bringing it forth. Because like, do I want to put this on one of my friends or on my partner? Do I want, like, is this going to be too much? Is this going to weigh too much? Is it going to scare them? Is it going to be intimidating? But when we can take full responsibility for it and say, you know what, like, I'm able to manage whatever is going to come up and I'm able to take care of it, but the sharing of it is what really gets to create um that intimacy. And so to that question, it's almost just, what can you do to support a man's vulnerability? Make sure that he knows that it is a safe space to share it, that he's not going to be judged for it, but also that you're not there to fix it either. Like, if you share something with me that you're upset, you're not going to go into a mode that then makes me feel like I'm wrong for having shared, or using it later in that, like, yeah, but you broke down, and you know, it can't ever be used again as a form of evidence for weakness, because that's what will then disconnect the man from his vulnerability once again, because that's the later shame, or just kind of, you know what I'm saying here. So I'm gonna leave it there. John, do you have anything to add to that, brother?
I would say that it's not, I don't believe that it's a uniquely female thing either. As a gay man, that comes up in gay relationships too, where, you know, there's a huge masculinity problem within the gay community. Other gay men want masculine men. What does that mean? And so when you're having feelings, and if you're in a same-sex relationship, those exact same things come up all the time as well. So it's not a uniquely individual heterosexual relationship thing. I think it's a human thing. Um, and it happens even with friends, right? I mean, I have a lot of female friends, and they are better at holding that space where they wouldn't shame me for having a feeling. Um, but my male friends would, because there's with gay men is they're very, a lot of them are very sarcastic, and sarcasm is used as a weapon and a defense mechanism, and that can shut you right down if you're having feelings with anyone using sarcasm as a weapon. And they're only doing it because they're feeling defensive and don't want to feel their feeling. So I do believe it's a uniquely human experience.
Right, John. Right. Yeah, you're right. Mask for mask. What the heck?
Yeah.
What do you mean? What do you mean mask for mask? No, yeah, yeah. It's it's interesting with as queer people, at least, you know, John and I, you know, there's this underlying generational trauma that we all carry because we've had to, and now here we are again, at least here in the US, having to sort of protect ourselves constantly. So I know one of the things that really helped me as someone who wants to be vulnerable in that connection, it's the four agreements. It's agreement number 3, don't take anything personal. understanding that when I go into a space with an individual, a friend, a romantic partner, being vulnerable is a risk. And I wish there was a world where we can all be vulnerable without having to risk anything. So far at 32, I have not found that space yet. And it is being okay in my journey of authenticity. When I choose, when I feel adequate, understand that this one step into showing and expressing my vulnerable self is a risk. And it is hoping that the relationship I have built with those on the other side of this connection will sustain my step. Sometimes it might not. And I might be met with a chuckle or a sarcasm, but at that moment, it's understanding that it's not personal, that that person might also be feeling certain things within them that they might not be able to understand, because we're all doing the best we can with what we have, even if that best is unhealthy. So it's as a human, as I need others to hold space for me, it's understanding that in that same exchange, I am also holding space for them, allowing them to hold space for me. So it's this beautiful exchange of, it's complicated and it is so easy, but again, it's complicated because at the end of the day, one of the things that helped me is understand that we're all doing the best we can with what we have. And that best might not be so healthy. And that is okay. So yeah.
I would even take it, I'd like to take it to an energy perspective. Most of us, especially if we've had childhood trauma, and most people, we live from our survival consciousness, and that's all root chakra stuff, right? So if a woman is thinking that the man is going to protect her, or even a male-male relationship, we're all looking for someone to protect us. And the male energy is that of the protector. But men want to be protected too. I have searched my entire life for people to protect me when that energy is in me all along. Because that's all root chakra stuff. The root chakra is all about safety, security, fear, lack, providing. We all have that survival consciousness. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing in a way as human beings, right? We're all trying to survive. So if you're shaming someone or seeking to be protected, that's go to your own healing. If that's what you're searching for, to be protected, go and do your own healing work.
Melanie, before we move on from this, I was reminded when Jake brought up Connor Beaton a little bit earlier. I was like, I got an email from this dude this week. It was talking about this very topic, right? It's really interesting. And so I had to go back and like find this thing, because what was coming up for me was especially if you're partnered with an individual who has a difficult time like accessing emotion or expressing those sorts of things, like know when to say when sometimes, right? Like it's not our job to like fix our partner, right? So I mean, I know for myself, like when my second marriage was falling apart, like I went to couples counseling. My ex-wife like was desperately trying to connect with me, and it wasn't really until I got myself into men's work that I was able to kind of like tap into that or begin to sort of like work through some of that stuff, and so just some of the points that Connor put in this email, and then I'll sort of land the plane, was like honor how he processes emotions. Don't interrupt the process, right? So don't jump in too soon when he's like actually like expressing things, and allow a whole lot of space to breathe, right? Like if there's something that drops, don't feel like you got to drop in there and like respond necessarily. Building a framework for trust, encouraging disciplined expression, right? So sometimes, I mean, I know when I've been in my pain before, I'll just like blurt some shit out, you know, and that's not necessarily the most healthy way to like, I mean, I may be expressing myself or being vulnerable, but there is a more like healthy and disciplined way to do that. Like maybe it's in journaling, maybe it's in like, again, kind of like a Imago dialogue or what have you, you know? And then the last was just avoiding pathologizing, you know, masculinity, right? So there's nothing to fix in any of us, right? It's just a matter of being able to hold compassionate space and be curious about each other, you know? So anyway, thank you for the reminder, Jake, because I was like, where did that email go? Because it was really right to this point. So
I just want to say that I think that everybody's always trying to fix people. I think that's like just a real strong part of human nature. And also I really feel like when I'm listening to this, as a woman who is, I feel like very masculine, I I know where you're coming from about the like sort of like accepting outside of a stereotype. And a question came in from Michelle that I really touches in on that. She said, in what ways do you find balance or even imbalance of your masculine and feminine energy?
I can start with a hot take, and whew, I think we, as especially as healers, and in this environment of the wellness culture, I think we've done a really good job for for a long time in separating feminine energy and masculine energy. I think we, in our exploration and in our attempts to understand the human nature and the human condition, we've done a really good job at separating the two. When in reality, it's one of the same, one and the same. I think for so many years, we, again, in our exploration, and this is not out of judgment, this is out of my own inner work. I would say I'm operating in my feminine energy, or I am stronger in my feminine energy, and in sort of neglecting the masculine energy because it was for me attached to toxicity. And then at some point I came strong into like, let me embrace my masculine energy, the protector, the whatever it is that this embodies, and then sort of neglecting the feminine energy. And the reality is that when we look at, in my case, and the thing with me is my spiritual journey is rooted in Christianity. That's just, and there's a lot of things that I still hold a lot of value for me. Weston, I heard your podcast in your intro, and you said something like that. Just saying. But truly understanding that there's this beautiful oneness that happens in embracing the reality of who I am as a person, that the divine is within me, and however it manifests itself is right, that it's not, I need to fix or change things to make it work in a certain way. Whatever is within me is right. It is masculine and it is feminine. So for me, my take on this is I have allowed myself to truly see the oneness of the two. And I say two in quotations because, again, I don't think there's a separation. I don't think there's as much of a separation as we have beautifully tried to explain our human condition. I think there's this beautiful oneness in spirit, this beautiful oneness in source, in the universe, that manifests however it manifests itself in the individual. And that is enough. That is right. I don't have to move more a certain way or express certain things a certain way. This is right, as long as it's healthy and as long as it's not harming anybody. So that's my hot take on the duality of the two.
I'll just quickly say for myself that during the last Venus retrograde, so this was in 23, the summer of 2023, I did a Blue Lotus Dieta that was all about harmonization of the divine feminine and the divine masculine within. And during that experience, I had to go back and do a lot of repair with the divine feminine within me and allow myself to just like grieve all the pain and suffering that I have brought to the feminine in my life. Whether it be my ex-wives, my daughter, my mother, stepmother, my sisters, you know, it just and even aspects of the feminine that I'm not even aware of. Mother Earth, let's just go there, right? And in doing so, I mean, Alejandro, to your point, like really realizing that, you know, the true goal is like moving more towards, you know, a divine union within. So that there is not necessarily a need to balance, but it is just walking in union in my day-to-day life, you know. So yeah, I mean, for me, I had to go back and do some real healing and repair, and that continues, you know. I think that may just be a part of, you know, the rest of my healing journey, my personal healing journey, is just like, you know, what are areas in my life where I've really you know, pushed the feminine aside, or like ignored it, or even like neglected it or done violence to it, that I need to like ask forgiveness for and forgive myself for, you know. So
Melanie, were you able to just repeat the question once more so I can have it fresh?
Well, Michelle was asking about how do you find balance or imbalance in your feminine and your masculine side?
Got it. Yeah. How do you find balance? I love both these takes. I definitely do. From my like experience, my perspective, I believe we both have access to both. Like it's um these are energies that run through both of us. And I think one aspect of finding balance is finding the edges of imbalance. So letting the pendulum swing from side to side to know, like, you know, when I found David Goggins, like I was in the most rigid, structured, masculine season of my life where I was like, you know, wake up at 5:55, big glass of water, 6 o'clock, long run, like, you know, X amount of miles. And like everything was so structured, so rigid, strong. Everything was like, you know, pendulum swung so far. And of course I burn out and I'm like hating life. And then the pendulum swings all the way to the far side of like ultimate divine mother, compassionate about everything. I sleep through my alarm clock. It's okay, sweetie. Like, no problem, little Jake. Like, and then, you know, I missed this appointment. It's okay. And like super compassionate. I'm super tender, super nurturing, receptive, speaking to the universe and like all things feminine. And then I'm like, for some reason, this is also like it's unfulfilling. It's driving me crazy. I feel like I need some structure. You know, when I moved down to Costa Rica, my whole goal was to like release any responsibility I had so that I could just do whatever I want, whenever I want, and have no one that needed me for anything. And I was depressed in a matter of 3 months because I had no responsibility and it was terrible. Despite it sounding perfect, you know, it was, and then it swings back and then it kind of like, so part of finding balance is experimenting with the edges. For myself, my process of finding balance between these two has actually been to, in light of kind of internal family systems, personifying my masculine and feminine energies within myself and giving them both an honest voice to go, hey, like the feminine, like I've named them, right? And so I've got these internal parts, which is Ray and Satya, and they'll speak up and it'll just be like, hey, this, my masculine, like he's craving a really hard workout because he wants to feel strong and empowered. But then when I'm working too much, I'll hear Satya speak up and just go, hey, like, we haven't rested in quite some time. We haven't slowed down. We haven't like been out in nature intentionally or whatever it is. I'm just using these as examples. But one of the ways that helps me find balance is to actually create these two parts of myself internally so that I can see what they need and allow them to be in relationship with me. It's this little trinity or this panel that I have at my table, right? I've got my inner child sitting to my left. I've got my feminine sitting over to the left side of the table, my masculine sitting to the right side. I've got my shadow Clive, who's like the dude who wants to fuck shit up and also is super in pain. And like I got him off to my back right side. So like him and the kid will like kind of be on either side of me. And then my higher self sits across the table. So it's this entire round table of my individuals, but the masculine and the feminine sit there so that I can keep them a part of the conversation. And that's one of the like tangible ways I strive for balance of those energies in my life. So one way to do it.
Can I add?
I'm gonna go ahead. I'm sorry,
Yeah, I
Weston.
was just going to add one more thing. I was listening to a podcast about a month or so ago with Traver Boehm and oh my God, why am I forgetting his last name? This gentleman that he works with, Dewey Freeman. Sorry, had a brain fart there for a second. And they were talking about the balance rather than masculine and feminine. They're talking about the balance between structure and softness, and how too much structure and not enough softness in our lives can lead to like authoritarianism and rigidity and inflexibility and like, you know, in all aspects, right? And too much softness and not enough structure can lead to like squishy boundaries and inability to make decisions, you know, and just like kind of being a little flaccid and kind of like, you know, wobbly. And so I think that's also another neat way to think about, you know, how to bring, because again, we can all bring this into our lives, right? Like a nice balance of both structure, you know, like I want to have a daily routine, and yet I also want to flow a little bit too, right? Like maybe save some time in that day for flexy, creative things. So like Jake, I can relate to the, you know, I've had a few different Goggins moments in my life, you know, where it was like I was able to make progress in one area, but not like really feel like a whole human moving forward, you know. So anyway, structure and softness.
Goggins. Yeah. I think I've had my era too, my 5 a.m. long miles, and I'm not a runner. So obviously that it's been a while since my Goggins era, but I like that. I really like that what you just said, Weston, the softness and the structure. That I'll take that. I think that's a beautiful way of bringing the duality into existence. I like that, because even going into, for me, into a prison setting or a halfway house setting and talking about, guys, let's embrace your feminine. They're like, what the? How about you just get out of here? Like, okay, yeah. So, but I like that. I like that. And Weston saying flaccid in a men's group, ballsy, ballsy. But hey, that's just
You're,
my image.
you're welcome.
I literally felt the same thing, Alejandro. I was like, wow, that's embracing vulnerability right there. And I'm just gonna put this out there today. I asked my husband to measure my bicep, and I pulled out the measure, and I had it at 7 inches, and he literally just started cracking up. And I'm like, I'm sorry that I have 2 boys and this is still happening at 55. Okay, I want to say something. Joaquin, I'm just going to read it because not everybody reads the chat, and I think this is really awesome. Joaquin said, to the earlier question on how to support men when women ask vulnerable questions, it takes me time to process. We need that extra time before responding. It doesn't come so easily to talk on emotions. We appreciate your patience. We hear you and honestly want to respond right away, but we can't always do so. Think of us on dial up. I hope it becomes easier, but thank you for always showing us support. And I think that's amazing. And on that note, Joaquin had a question earlier, and it was said, how has your definition of masculinity changed at this point in your lives? Even for you youngins.
I feel called out, but that's okay. I hear young. I'll answer. Um, for me, masculinity now is it's this. It's this. It's this is right. This is I'm no longer looking externally to find what it should be. I'm looking internally to define what masculinity looks like for me. Because for some people, it might look like waking up at 5 a.m. and running those 18 miles. For me, it looks like holding that space and sometimes running the 3 miles, not the 18. Don't play. Um, so my discovery of masculinity and embracing masculinity has been the discovery of myself, understanding that the divine lives within me. And as I embrace that divine within me and I allow the divine identity to express itself, that is being man enough. Um, and then being around other men who nurture the journey, whatever that might look like. So yeah, for me, masculinity has been, it's now defined by my inner self. My inner child was man enough, and it continues to be man enough, even with the pain and the hurt. What I saw as weakness was actually an amazing strength. What I used to protect myself, that was the masculine showing up to protect young Alex in the midst of the mess. So for me, masculinity is defined as going inward. This is masculinity. This is man enough with the edges and the balance. So yeah, that's my answer.
I love that, Alejandro. Um, for me, it's probably I don't have to have bouts of anger and respond in anger, which is a very masculine energy. Um, because that for me, anger is my shadow because my energy is so repressed and tight in my body because I didn't have that vulnerability and holding on to that trauma and stepping into that female energy of vulnerability, and it would come out as anger. And so as I've released some of those emotional blocks and dealt with that trauma, I don't respond with anger anymore. I respond with a firm boundary. And because most of my life, I let people walk all over me. In my personal life, as I would being codependent and a people pleaser, but in my work life, I was a completely different person. I would never let anyone walk all over me. It was like two different people almost. So in my work life, I was very masculine, but in my personal life, I was very feminine energy. So it's about bringing those two together. Um, and for me, it's just having boundaries and not responding with anger.
This is This is a juicy question. Defining masculinity. You know, if you were to Google it, comes up with some of the divine traits. When we look up yin and yang energies, we can use these as our, you know, if we get caught up with masculine and feminine, we get too pulled into seeing it synonymous with man and woman, or with to kind of take a different approach and look at yin and yang energy, and those energetics, and just kind of what their divine characteristics and qualities are. I think it, for me, it really helped at one point to know what some of these characteristics were, to know that like masculinity inherently at its core is going to be a depth of presence. It's going to provide structure. It's going to provide some direction, some assertiveness, some clarity. These are things that will come inherently that will travel alongside masculine energy when it's expressed in healthy ways, you know. And so for me, it has these kind of pillars, which with masculinity, divine masculine, healthy masculine, mature masculine expression looks like. And sometimes I'll look at some of like the really great father figures in my life to kind of look at like, hey, what does this look like when it's embodied? Because it's one thing how we were mentioning taking masculine and feminine and bringing it into softness and structure, and like, okay, nice, like it becomes tangible. And I think that's so important with some of these concepts, because they can be floating around and some of us look at it and go, well, how do I apply that? How do I use that? How do I work with that? And so how has it changed? I know for sure it's evolved from I'm just thinking of like the way that what I thought masculinity was, you know, when I was 12, or when I was, and of course I wouldn't even have been using those words at that point. It was just like what a man is. And that's like what masculinity looks like then versus when I was 18, versus after I was traveling at 24, versus now at 27. And it's all these slightly different iterations of it. And it's not something that I'm like, it's not something I feel so convicted in, that's like, this is it, you know. um and simultaneously, for my own process, I have to have certain pillars that are like, when I want to like tap into my masculine energy, my matured masculine energy, I have to like, these are some of the things I can begin to practice: being a slightly more structured, slightly more disciplined, slightly more assertive, more and that's what allows, you know, we place them on the spectrum of masculine and feminine, like they're at odds with each other, but they're synergistic, they're complementary, that's the whole symbol of yin and yang. So yeah, I'm not sure if that actually fully answers it, but that's just what wanted to come through. So
Thank you, Jake. And I think for myself, as my life has progressed, you know, I probably started out with a pretty standard definition of what it meant to be a man when I was younger. You know, it was really in kind of like an acquisition or like a accumulation kind of mindset, right? Like more success, more money, more, just more, right? And, you know, especially over the last year of my life and some of the experiences I've had, particularly related to my health, like I've really just deepened into this idea that, you know, for me, like the ultimate expression of my strength as a male body being is in my presence, in my openness, in my curiosity, in my ability to bring unconditional love into the relationships that I'm a part of in my communities. And I think just really, you know, harmonizing like light and dark aspects of, you know, all the kind of like main archetypes of, you know, lover, magician, warrior, and king. uh, not punishing myself too much, not judging myself too much, and also holding a high standard, of excellence for how I want to show up in the world. So yeah, I mean, I think overall just being, having more of like a gentle and abiding presence in the world rather than like trying to prove something or do something in order to appear a certain way in the society, So I just kind of leave it at that.
Thank you. Keith asked I think it's a great question, very unique. Keith said, I had a recent plant medicine experience where I was told that men can be mothers too, which I initially rejected. What are your thoughts on this? Is this possible in a way that's healthy and conducive to healing? And I will put it in the chat for you guys.
I would say yes, coming from it from an inner child standpoint. Because my mom was an alcoholic growing up, so she wasn't there a lot and didn't have that mother energy. And I know that my dad probably tried to do some mothering, even though he was emotionally unavailable. So it comes as an adult in the reparenting of yourself, both mother and father. It absolutely comes into play, and something that I believe that we have to do for ourselves and for our inner child to when we reparent ourselves. And a part of the big reparenting for me is giving myself those positive messages that I didn't receive as a child. It's another whole big topic to go down, but um, yes, I believe that you can, and a man can also be a mother. That energy, because it's just all it is an energy, right? It's being a caretaker, being vulnerable, having feelings, having boundaries. It's more just an energy.
I'll say, oof, oof, oof. Um, Good question. Good question. I'll say energetically, I think when I hear the word mother, I hear nurturing. So yes, can a man be nurturing? Absolutely. But as a man raised by a single mother, my mom could have never offered to me what my dad could have psychologically, and even emotionally. There is this beautiful duality, and psychologically, boys need men to understand themselves. That's just how it works. That's just how we're wired. So yes, I agree that men can be nurturing and can nurture um us, and I have had to nurture myself into my healing journey. And I'm not saying that mom and dad need to be present, but I'm saying that the presence of a male figure in a child's life is important, same as the female figure. And my mom will say this, and she said it in one of my lives, and it was a hot take. Some people didn't really, but my mom was not mom and dad. She was just mom. and protected me and had this masculine energy in guidance in a lot of things, but my mom could not teach me how to pee standing up. And those are psychologically, those are really important stepping stones that we all need, both male and female, in our nurture aspect of developing. As adults, finding healing, and healing, yes, we can embody whatever it is that I believe that whatever we need is within us. And as some mature adults, we can tap into these energies and truly provide to ourselves and connect with source, with spirit, with God, and provide to ourselves the healing that we need to heal that inner child. But I'll say, yes, a man can be nurturing, and a man can provide the softness and but when it comes to psychological development, which is my background in psychology, children need both to be modeled. And that's how a child cannot go into their inner self and find their identity. There needs to be some modeling going on. So I'll say it again. Yes, a dad can be nurturing, and a dad can provide this softness and this safe spaces of exploration and beauty and love and kindness, which is that motherly aspect. But I believe we need both. And my mom is in the comments, and I know I can see it here because I can see her picture on my because she's a child development specialist. So anyways, that's my take on that.
I would push back a little bit on that, because what I'm hearing in a way is that same-sex parents can't do the job of a male-female parent. Because that has been proven not to be true. So I'm not sure if that's what you're saying, Alejandro.
No, not at all. What I'm saying is the presence of both masculine and feminine needs to be in the child's life.
You mean
Uh,
the energy?
we're talking about, can a dad be a mom?
Mm-hmm.
As a child, we need both energies, but it needs to be modeled. In the society we live in, the child does not, it's not able to I'll speak for myself. I needed male presenting humans in my life to develop as a man. I didn't have that for a long time. Yes, later on, I had mentors and I had beautiful people, men in my life who validated who I was as a growing man. But my mom could not provide the identity of a man, model that to me. My mom could not model what it's like to be a man, to the point. I mean, and I say this because I was maybe 2 years old when I asked my mom like how to pee, like, and my mom could not teach me how to pee standing up. And I know that sounds very trivial because in all honesty, I pee sitting down now because it's more hygienic for me. So it sounds very trivial to talk about these things, but it is the way we are wired in those little things. My am I saying, am I, by no means am I saying that same-sex parents are not going to be able to do it, but it takes a village. It takes a village for heterosexual parents. It takes a village for homosexual parenting. It takes a village. And my mom thankfully had a beautiful village of men, women, heterosexual, bisexual, homosexual, who helped me mold me into who I am today. But it truly takes a village. So we can, as children, we can truly grasp what it can be modeled, it can be mirrored to us, and we can grasp whatever it is that we need and resonates with us as little humans, as individuals. So yes, and both need to be present, not as mom and dad, but as we need to be able, as children need to be able to mirror themselves in other people, whatever that looks like, in all kinds of people, which again, I was blessed enough to have, and say, oh, I see that. I see myself in that. I can model after that. I see myself in that. I can model after that. I see myself in my uncle, who was very gay and very flamboyant and very open, and I love him. And he was the first father figure I had, but it was still a male presenting that validated my own maleness. Is that even a word, maleness? It is now.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I drop in here just real quick?
Yes.
Cool. So I mean, I love this question. And I want to go back to something that Michelle was put in the chat like way long ago, asking about intuition, right? So when I see this question, or you receive this download in a plant ceremony that men can be mothers too, what comes forward for me is when we think of like the womb, right? It's like the ultimate seat of creation, right? Like that is where all like creative power comes from in female body beings, right? So when I think of myself and my ability to generate in this world, to create, to bring forth goodness and abundance for all, right? That's a place that like I bring that back to my Dantian, right? So to my man womb, basically the way I talk about it, is like when I'm creating from that place of safety, when I'm creating from that place of like emotional centeredness, of just a deep inner knowing, that's how I think I am giving birth to beautiful things in the world, right? The other piece is going back to intuition, which Michelle had brought up, and I think that's another part too that tends to be kind of conditioned out of male-bodied beings as we're raised, to, we talk about listen to your gut, but it's really like, can you be quiet? Can you be still? Can you be an open channel for spirit to work through you rather than just, coming at it from an egoic place, So, I mean, I know for myself personally, I've really been trying to like refine my ability to listen to my intuition. And so I think there's something in there too about men being mothers. It's like there's that intuitive energy, there's that generative and creative energy, that for me, that's what I react to when I see this question. So
Anybody have anything they want to add to that? Okay, this is I think as a mom of two boys, I love this question from Elizabeth. I want any tips, truths from any of you regarding raising boys through the tricky parts, puberty, society, etc. of life. Is there a way to cultivate a sense of comfort and confidence within themselves, but doesn't leave them as easy targets? I'm constantly teetering between teaching them how to be their true selves, but then having to explain safe places to show their vulnerabilities. It just doesn't feel right, and I wish I could tell them to show their full selves to the world, but the truth is, it's not fully safe to do that. I just feel torn.
I'll just jump in here real quick because this is very present for me. I have a son that's going to be 17 here in a month, which is crazy to even think about. And I also do work in his high school as like a mentor for young men in his high school too. And I really have to say that like giving them experiences. I mean, I'm kind of also a nature guy too, so I find there's a lot of programs that are out there, whether it's summer programs or even like online stuff. Sacred Sons does a lot of really neat work with men, and they have a youth mentorship program called Sons Youth, that really, not only does it create a safe space for these boys to kind of like get together and talk about what's present for them, but there's also, you know, kind of a rites of passage, a more like traditional rites of passage structure there as well, that's held in a container with like, you know, individuals who've been vetted and who've done this work a whole lot. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a scary world that we live in. I can only just say for my son, I make sure every single day that he hears from me how much I love him, how proud of him I am, regardless of his accomplishments, that, you know, what an honor it is to be his father. I can't believe I actually haven't cried to this point. Because anytime I talk about my son, I'm just like, wow. But I think that's just really important is, you know, from a parental standpoint, like knowing, you know, where the standards of excellence are that you have to set for your family. And then just holding space for their own unique human experience, right? And trying not to be judgmental and trying not to be critical, but just holding space for like their sovereign experience of life. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of like how I try to show up in my son's life. So
I'm gonna try to field this one. I don't have kids, but I get to field it from the aspect of being the kid who was raised by parents who I am, you know, they're 51 and 52 now, and I would say that we have an extremely healthy and beautiful relationship where I look up to, I respect, I admire, I enjoy. Like I'm living down here in Costa Rica so that I can spearfish with my dad and I can do beach walks with my mom, and you know, like I can be closer to them, not because it's this like codependent haven't left the nest, but it's like because I appreciate, like, of all the human beings who I find fascinating on this earth, I love and appreciate them so deeply that getting to spend more quality time with them is a gift, and it's something I choose now at this point. Like I could go live anywhere. You know, I split time between Canada, the US and Costa Rica, and I could be in any of those three countries right now, and you know, I like this time here with them. And so from that standpoint, I know that there were probably aspects when my parents look back, they were like, we didn't do this perfectly. Of course, I'm sure all parents have to some degree. Um, and yet, as a kid, one two things that have gone a really long ways for me is, Wes, as you mentioned, like I felt a lot from my dad that it was he would nurture whichever direction I wanted to go in, but he would help me build competency at whatever I chose. And building competency in young men is so, so important. When we look at the studies of, they studied that, this is a slightly like heavier turn, but it's important because suicide is amongst men is one of the leading causes of death. And when they study all of the a wide range of the notes left behind by men, the reason that most of these men are taking their lives, this is a broad sweeping statement, so of course there's individual cases, but feeling useless or like they're incompetent or incapable it's almost the golden thread that follows a lot of these notes left behind. Like they're unable to contribute, they're unable to take care of themselves, their family, they're incapable. And so the fact that my dad was able to instill and nurture a sense of competency, it wasn't him telling me what I needed to do or who, like, what sport to play and which, go be a lawyer, a doctor. It wasn't that. It was listening and watching what I was passionate about and then nurturing that within me. And of course, there were some things he loved to do that I got to tag along: camping, woodworking, this kind of stuff. Um, so that's one for sure that I think is a beautiful gift that they gave. And then it was interesting because I don't know for the parents exactly all the situations that are unfolding, but I know that my parents brought forth the idea that like you can speak about anything with us. Like you can always speak about anything with us. And like as many times as they said that, I still didn't want to go to them. I'm like, you guys are still my parents. I'm not talking to you about sex. I'm not talking to you about my dating life. I'm not talking about like you can say it 1,000 times and you can bring it to every dinner conversation and say, hey, like, was there anything on your mind or on your heart? And it's like, no, I'm gonna go talk to like I would go talk to a stranger dude before I talked to my parents, and I couldn't tell you exactly why. Like it was just there's some dynamic there that, and maybe there are parents, and now I've developed that capacity with them, but there was almost a season where that felt inaccessible. And I'm not saying that this is always the case. I'm sure there are parents who have this relationship with their kids, but I think there is an aspect of like a kid will go to someone other than their parents. And if we look at Jungian psychology or like the individuation process, creating that clear separation from the parents is a very important skill in finding our own individuality. So if they're going to someone else, I didn't even go to an uncle. I went to like a family friend with some of these things that weighed heavier, or a youth group counselor that I just felt more, I felt like I could share with them and it wasn't going to detriment the relationship or whatever that is. So that was another thing. And I know that, and maybe that just comes through as being okay or allowing them to have spaces outside of you as parents to be able to be vulnerable. It doesn't always have to be with you the entire time. So that was just from the perspective of the kid.
Absolutely, Jake. Absolutely. It's in psychology, we call it the circle of security. It's understanding that your child will leave the nest, but always having the option for them to come back. So I had the same thing at home. I had the same conversations. You can always talk to me about whatever. I remember the drugs conversation. If you need drugs, come to me. Excuse me. What? But I knew did I talk to my mom about sex? Absolutely not. Now we might, and still kind of weird, but hi mom, you're in the comments. Hello. But um, but there was always a sense of I can. Did I go to the youth group leader? Yes. Did I go to even the therapist? Yes. Did I go to the school counselor? Yeah. But I knew that at home, if I needed to, I could talk about it. I knew that there was a safe space. So to answer Elizabeth's question, again, not as a parent, but as a son, providing that space to be just as we are without pushing it. That's another thing. I feel like sometimes the more parents want to bring us in, the more we'll pull back because again, we're trying to find ourselves, and it is 100% healthy to have that separation and that individuality. But knowing that I can always come back, that I can leave the nest and I can leave my platform and I can fly out, explore, but I can always come back home. And even with my mistakes, even fucking shit up, because believe me, I did. I knew that I could always come back home. And there was no judgment. Yes, there might have been okay, how are we gonna work through this? But it was always, I always knew that I was loved, even in the silence, even in my distance, even when I said, I don't want anything to do with anybody, thank you. I always knew that I could always come back home. So truly providing that safe space and allowing us to mess up, especially as boys, allowing us to mess up without the I told you so, without the be careful. Of course, a mother's and a father's love will always say be careful, and maybe Weston can talk more on that, but allowing us to make our own mistakes and learn from them. I know you want us to not experience pain. I know you want us to not experience hurt, but believe me, we need it. We need it. It'll help us grow. So, and always knowing that we can come back home, whatever home is, we can always come back to you. So 100%, Jake, 100%.
That's it. I was gonna say everybody needs that growth. This is what we're missing, just putting it out there as a parent and a teacher of young people. We're not allowing people to make mistakes. We're hovering, we're doing all the things, and they're not growing and they're not thinking. Well, if anybody has any last questions, now's the time. We're gonna wrap it up.
I love what you said about hovering because I'm also a mom of two boys, as you know. And I was always very big on not hovering and being hands off. And I am really proud of the way my sons have turned out. So I'm with you 100%.
I'll just drop in too also because you know, my son is into some pretty sketchy. He's got, yeah, like he has a photography hobby that takes him into some pretty sketchy scenarios that oftentimes take my breath away a little bit. And I think what I've had to do, and this goes kind of like a little bit of a spiritual tie-in, is that you know, there's a way of viewing other people or other sentient beings in the world, and it could be like I versus it, right? In a lot of ways, the way that we create separation in the world is like having this sort of like I it relationship with others, right? It could be you know, another human being, it could be a tree, it could be a river, etc., right? But when you sort of shift that relationship from I it to I thou, and you sort of like recognize the divinity or the spirituality or the like worthiness and rightness of that other being, then it sort of creates you know, I feel more of an opportunity for passion, for empathy, for curiosity, for that other person to make mistakes, without bringing like shame and judgment and, you know, all the, like, I don't want to put any more baggage on my son than he's probably already going to accumulate, you know? So, I mean, it was done to me when I was raised, you know, in the Southern Baptist Church, and I'm still working on that. Still working on recovering from some of that stuff, you know? So anyway, I felt like, you know, moving from I it to I thou for me is just a helpful exercise in trying to like honor the divinity in all other beings, you know? So whether it's my kid or somebody I don't know on the street. So
Well, are you guys doing any lives coming up on Insight Timer? How can people connect with you? How can they support you?
Was that my cue? I've been so quiet, I know. I forgot, I fell asleep now. Yeah, please share with us what you have coming up. Any last thoughts, any lives you've got coming up, anything you want to share?
Yes, I will be live twice tomorrow at 10 and 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for a new moon astrological balancing. And then Friday, I'll be live twice again for a commitment to love. I'm bringing some new stuff for everyone with energy healing. We're going to be working with the energy of Om, which is all about creation. If you do get a chance, join us for a commitment to love. Violet scheduled the next live for March 18th, and it's an open invitation to everyone. It's not a prescription, it's an invitation to um, commit to love, because there's so much going on in the world right now, that a lot of our community is bringing their pain into lives. Our teachers are going through real world experiences on what's happening in our country here in the United States, and it's affecting everyone in the world. So we're trying to keep the focus on love during these times when there's so much hate and division in the world. And if you haven't checked out the live from last week, you can check that out on Violet 108's profile as well.
And I want to throw in there that March 18th Commitment to Love follow-up. Our co-host is going to be Alejandro.
Yay.
Jake, do you want to share anything you have coming up?
Yeah, I mean, my next live is scheduled for Friday. This one's gonna be a men. I've been trying to gear some specifically for men on Inside Timer. It's a little bit of a quieter crowd out there, but I still want to invite you guys to it because it's a slow grow in the men's community and Inside Timer. Other than that, we've got a retreat coming up at the end of April, men's retreat down here in Costa Rica, and yeah, I think that's it for right now. I just massive
Excellent.
thank you to you guys for hosting us, Melanie and Violet and John, Alejandro, and Weston. Awesome to share a panel with you guys. This has been great.
Happy to do it. Is the retreat in your teacher's profile? Can people find it?
It not yet, but
Okay.
I'm working on that.
Okay. Weston, what do you have coming up?
Yeah, I've got my Monday morning meditation, 9 a.m. Eastern time. Jake, I'm gonna do my best to be there Friday morning, man. I've got a big interview Friday afternoon, but I'm gonna try to be there for your event Friday morning. And yeah, that's it. So every Monday, you can visit my teacher page and RSVP to the events there. Got a couple of other pre-recorded meditations there too, but I'm just so grateful. Once again, Violet and Melanie for the invitation, and John, Alejandro, Jake, it's great to be here with you guys. What a pleasure.
And Alejandro, share. And Alejandro, thank you for the suggestion because this was amazing. I loved it.
Thank you, and Melanie for having us. Jake, Weston, John. It's been dope. It's been dope. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Truly honored. One of and I've been in a lot of Ask Your Guides. Believe me, I've been in a lot of them. This is probably top two. I have a live every Saturday at 8:30 a.m. Mountain Time. So I'll be here this Saturday. And then I have my course on vulnerability. It's a 3-day course. It's pretty short, but truly put out there with a lot of heart and truly the introduction to just quick steps to start stepping into vulnerability or continue your vulnerability journey. And yeah, and I'll be here March 18th, co-hosting. Whoop whoop. Call me Melanio that day. Love you, Melanie. I'll be Melanio that day. I might even wear a wig. No, just kidding. I'm kidding, guys. I'm kidding.
No, I want you in a Farrah Fawcett wig, buddy.
I'll do this number. So anyways, thank you, Melanie. Thank you. Violet, John, Jake, Weston, everyone who's been here. Thank you so much. I'm truly honored, truly blessed to be here. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. The honor's mine. Believe me, I love doing these and I love these suggestions. So keep them coming. What was I going to say? Oh, I know Kevin is in the chat, Meditation Space Online. And Kevin and I, Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern, are doing a live on introverts. Melanie was not invited because clearly she's not an introvert, but she will be heckling us in the chat. And Melanie, do you want to share what you've got coming up?
Sure, I would love to. I have a retreat that you can find here on Insight Timer, and I have 2 spots left, which I'm really excited about. It sold really well, and I have a live Friday morning at 9 for my sound healing, and then my mindful cooking on Sunday, 9:30 Eastern time. So I hope you guys can make it. Thank you, Violet.
Awesome. And Blossom Violet's also in the chat. We have a live tomorrow on journaling where she plays her amazing piano music. So if you haven't caught that, please do. Sam, thank you so much for that donation. I always let people know that I like to share my donations with animal rescues. I've got a couple of other projects I'm sharing them with right now, so they're always appreciated. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for the crowd and your amazing, oh, thank you, Tracy. Thank you for your donation. Thank you for those amazing questions. Thank you for your energy. You know, I thrive on these. I love doing them. I love technology, and I love being able to use it for this purpose. So I want to thank the teachers for your time, the community for being with us, and you will be seeing us again, I'm sure. So we're going to end our live. If anybody has any last words, feel free. Speak now, forever hold your peace. Otherwise, we are out.
Peace. Love y'all.
Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.